Caitlin Clark said nothing. As clips of her being slammed to the floor circulated and the WNBA scrambled with backstage PR tactics, Clark didn't rant, retaliate, or issue dramatic statements. Her weapon was restraint, and in a media landscape addicted to drama, her calm hit harder than outrage. The league tried to minimize the event to buy time with silence.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
But Clark's quiet resolve turned into a lightning rod. Sponsors called, commentators weighed in, and fans demanded answers. The attempt to downplay her assault didn't just fail. It backfired into a defining moment of reckoning. In the fallout, Clark's composure became more than a personal trait. It became a standard. Her disciplined focus threw into sharp relief the WNBA's lack of leadership. While league officials spun and stumbled, Clark stood still, and in that stillness, the center of gravity shifted. The reforms that followed weren't just reactions, they were concessions. Her restraint had reshaped the league's priorities. In a world that often confuses noise for power, Clark proved that credibility comes not from volume, but from conviction. It started with a hit, not a metaphorical one, not a storyline cooked up by the media, an actual physical, in-your-face hit. Caitlin Clark, mid-game, was aggressively body-checked in a way that clearly crossed a line. And what should have been an immediate response from the WNBA turned into an absolute disaster of silence, denial, and damage control that only made everything worse. The league's response? Or rather, its lack of one? That was the real story. Instead of standing behind their breakout star, the woman who was single-handedly driving viewership numbers, ticket sales, and league-wide relevance, they chose to minimize the incident. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and her team took the behind-closed-doors route, reportedly opting for weak, quiet PR strategies aimed at keeping everything low-key. No accountability, no strong statement, just the hope that if they said nothing, people would move on. They didn't. What the WNBA didn't expect was the immediate, fiery reaction from fans, players, media outlets, and sponsors. Clips of the incident went viral within hours. The footage made the rounds, sparking outrage not just because of how hard Clark was hit, but because of how visibly the league tried to pretend like it didn't matter. That hit became a flashpoint, not just for Clark's safety, but for the way the WNBA was handling, or more accurately, mishandling, its own rising star. This wasn't a random rookie. This was the face of the league, a player who had helped catapult women's basketball into national headlines and brought in a surge of new fans. And when she got targeted on the court, the WNBA blinked. Hard. As the league stumbled over its own messaging, Clark didn't say a word. No fiery post-game quote. No long-winded Instagram statement. Nothing. She just kept showing up, kept performing, and kept delivering elite-level basketball like the situation wasn't even happening. That silence? It wasn't indifference. It was strategy. Because while the league's leadership scrambled to manage optics, Clark let her composure do the talking. And it spoke volumes. Her refusal to play into the chaos, her focus on the game, her complete lack of public retaliation, it all added up to something far more powerful than any league-issued statement. It made her untouchable. She didn't fight back with words. She fought back with points on the board, assists, steals, and every ounce of professionalism the league was failing to show her. Fans noticed. Media noticed. Sponsors definitely noticed. And that's where the league got hit where it hurts the most, the money. Brands like Nike and Gatorade, both closely tied to Clark, didn't stay silent. Through private pressure and strategic signals, they made it clear that the WNBA's failure to protect their star wasn't going unnoticed. If things didn't change, those sponsorship dollars were going to disappear. That's when the league finally snapped out of its PR coma. Suddenly, rules were being reviewed. Internal policies were revisited. There were statements, generic yes, but at least they acknowledged something happened. A far cry from the initial stonewalling, but still not enough to erase the fact that this only came after public pressure, media blowback, and sponsor threats. The WNBA didn't lead through this crisis. It was dragged, and that dragging didn't just come from the media. NBA legends like Charles Barkley and Stephen A. Smith weighed in, slamming the double standards. Their message was clear. If a hit like that happened in the NBA, there would have been immediate suspensions and public outrage. But in the WNBA, it was treated like a minor inconvenience. That contrast exposed a huge problem, not just in how the WNBA protects its players, but in how it views its stars. Clark wasn't just any player. She was a proven draw. She was selling out arenas, driving TV ratings, getting casual viewers to tune in for the first time. She was doing more for the league than some of its top executives, and still, she was left out to dry. The fans didn't forget that. And in this new era of hyper-connected sports culture, fans have power. A lot of power. They don't just consume content. They respond to it. They clip it, post it, circulate it, and build pressure in real time. And that's exactly what happened here. People didn't just watch Clark get hit. They demanded something be done about it. The backlash forced the league to confront something they clearly weren't ready for: the new power dynamic. The one where fans and players, not executives, drive the narrative. Clark didn't go viral because the league hyped her up. She went viral because fans chose her. Sponsors backed her. Media elevated her. And when the league failed her, they all made sure the world saw it. That shift is irreversible. Clark's response, or her deliberate lack of one, set a new standard, not just for athletes dealing with controversy, but for how athletes can seize control of a narrative without ever having to say a word. Her quiet strength made the league look even weaker. And as the WNBA scrambled to play catch-up, it became painfully obvious. Clark wasn't just a player. She was now the moral center of sport. When the league finally acknowledged the incident and promised to revisit their policies, it didn't feel like leadership. It felt like a concession. A forced pivot after every single traditional method of spin had failed. The league had been outmaneuvered not by an outrage campaign, but by a calm, consistent force of nature who just kept playing basketball better than anyone else. And that's the real kicker. Clark didn't win this battle with drama. She won it with performance, with composure, with a quiet refusal to play by the league's broken PR playbook. That's why her win was bigger than just getting rules changed. It was a reset, a hard stop on the old way of doing things. Because now, every move the league makes is going to be viewed through this lens. Every foul, every injury, every player conflict. People will ask, what would have happened if this were Caitlin Clark? And more importantly, what had happened when it was? The memory of how the league failed its biggest star is going to linger. And that memory, it's shaping the future. We're now in an era where fans and athletes hold more power than ever, where sponsors dictate policy by speaking with their wallets, where a player's silence can make more headlines than an official press conference. And Clark? She's not just surviving this environment. She's mastering it, without theatrics, without controversy, just with elite skill and unshakable composure. She's redefined what control looks like. And now the league has no choice but to catch up. They've seen what happens when they ignore the people who actually make the game worth watching. They've learned that silence, when it comes from the top, is dangerous. But silence from a player like Clark? That's power. This wasn't a one-off moment. It was a shift. A visible, undeniable shift in how professional sports are governed and who really gets to call the shots. And in that shift, Caitlin Clark didn't just rise, she dominated. If you've been following this mess from the start, let's hear your take. Did the league finally wake up, or are they still just putting on a show? Drop a comment, share this with someone who's been just as glued to the fallout, and hit that subscribe button. Because the story of Clark and the WNBA isn't over, and neither is the pressure to get it right. The fallout didn't just end with a half-hearted statement or a policy update buried in the middle of a press release. No, this went deeper. What Caitlin Clark's quiet stand exposed wasn't just a one-time oversight. It was a cultural problem baked into the foundation of the WNBA's leadership. A problem that couldn't be PR'd away or smoothed over with a graphic on social media. Because when you stay silent in the face of something so obviously wrong, people start asking harder questions. Why didn't the league react faster? Why did it take a media storm and sponsor pressure for them to even acknowledge the incident? Why does it feel like protecting optics mattered more than protecting players? The answer is uncomfortable. It's because leadership thought they could control the story. They assumed fans would move on. They assumed Clark would move on. They assumed sponsors would stay quiet. They assumed wrong. By the time the league tried to pivot, the damage was irreversible. The trust had already cracked. Fans weren't just disappointed, they were furious. They weren't asking for statements anymore. They were demanding accountability. And not just for what happened to Clark, but for how the league treated the entire situation. And while that firestorm raged, Clark kept doing what she does best, performing. No tantrums, no press circuit, just straight-up excellence on the court. She didn't change her game, she elevated it. And in doing so, she turned the tables completely. The power that once belonged solely to league officials and PR teams now clearly lived elsewhere, in the hands of the fans, the media, the sponsors, and most importantly, the players. And it didn't take long before that shift became obvious. Commentators stopped speaking in hypotheticals and started using names. The incident was being referenced in live broadcasts. Post-game interviews tiptoed around it. You could feel the discomfort radiating from anyone trying to act like it was old news. It wasn't, because every time Clark stepped onto the court, it was a reminder, not just of her talent, but of how little the league did to stand up for her when it counted most. And the irony? They tried to move on without ever acknowledging the full weight of the moment. But Clark's silence ensured that the story never really died. It just kept simmering beneath the surface. You could sense in the way fans chanted louder, showed up more, and posted relentlessly. They weren't just supporting a player, they were defending her. And they weren't going to let the league rewrite history in real time. The pressure was unrelenting. And eventually, the league had no choice but to adjust, not because they suddenly saw the light, but because they were cornered. Policy reforms were announced. There was talk of increased monitoring, better officiating, and new safety guidelines. All things that, frankly, should have already been standard. But now they had to scramble to implement them. And all because one player's quiet resilience shined a giant spotlight on their failures. That's the part that still stings. Clark didn't ask for this role. She didn't seek out controversy. But when it came, she responded with a level of class that made everyone else look completely out of touch. And as the league tried to claw back credibility, it became painfully clear they weren't in control anymore. The fans were steering the ship. The media was asking the questions. The sponsors were setting the bar. And Clark? She became the standard. Every game she played was now being watched through a new lens. Not just as a showcase of skill, but as a test. Will the league protect her now? Will they take her seriously? Will they finally do right by the player they've benefited from the most? And the answer? Still murky. Because while reforms were promised, fans are keeping receipts. There's no going back to the old way of doing things. This incident made that impossible. The league had a chance to lead with integrity and transparency. Instead, they waited until the pressure left them no other option. And even now, everything they do is being measured against what they didn't do when it mattered most. Caitlin Clark didn't just win this standoff. She redefined what winning looks like. It's not about flashy headlines or social media dominance. It's about showing up, doing the work, and refusing to fold when everything around you gets messy. Her ability to stay composed when the league faltered revealed something that goes beyond basketball. It exposed how fragile institutional credibility really is when it's not backed by action. And it showed that authenticity, real, quiet, unshakable authenticity, will always outlast spin. Fans didn't rally behind Clark because she screamed injustice. They rallied because she didn't have to. Her restraint said more than any angry post ever could. She reminded people that strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like calm. Sometimes it looks like grace under pressure. And sometimes it looks like a player who just keeps doing her job while the people in power scramble to do theirs. That contrast between her professionalism and the league's evasiveness is what will be remembered most. And it's what will keep reshaping this league long after the headlines fade. Because this wasn't just about Clark getting hit. It was about how the WNBA responded to its most valuable player getting hit. And that response, delayed, diluted, disappointing, revealed a league still struggling to meet the moment. Now, every move the WNBA makes is under the microscope. Every decision is a test of whether they've actually learned anything from this. And whether they like it or not, Clark is at the center of that evolution. She didn't ask to lead a movement, but the league's failure made her the face of one. And here's what's clear. She's not going anywhere. She's still dominating, still bringing in fans, still representing everything the league should be celebrating. Only now, she does it with the full weight of this controversy behind her, and with a massive crowd ready to hold the league accountable if they ever try to pull the same silence routine again. So what does the future look like? It looks a lot more transparent, a lot more player-focused, and a lot more resistant to the kind of quiet brushing under the rug that got the WNBA into this mess in the first place. Clark's response set the tone, and now it's on the league to match it, because fans are paying attention, sponsors are paying attention, and players? They've seen what happens when one of their own refuses to play along with the old rules. The WNBA tried to ignore a moment. Clark turned it into a movement. The ripple effects of the Caitlin Clark incident haven't stopped. They've just gone underground, weaving into every single interaction the league has with fans, with media, with players. Because when you betray the trust of your most visible, most impactful star, it doesn't just disappear after one apology and a few rule tweaks. It lingers, it festers, and it becomes a reference point for everything that comes after. People remember how you handle crisis, or in the WNBA's case, how you didn't. You can feel it now in every broadcast, every press conference, every interview where a reporter carefully asks a player what they think about league safety or policy updates. You can see the strain in the commissioner's face every time Caitlin Clark's name is brought up, not as a highlight reel machine, but as a reminder of everything that went wrong. Because let's be real, this wasn't a PR issue. It was a leadership failure. And the league's initial silence? That wasn't just about risk management. It was about control, about trying to keep the conversation on their terms, even when the entire internet was screaming something else. They thought they could steer this story. Instead, they lost the wheel completely. Meanwhile, Clark never swerved. She didn't need to clap back. She didn't need to threaten lawsuits or boycott games or drop cryptic tweets. She just played, flawlessly, night after night. And that, somehow, hurt them more than anything she could have said. Because the more she performed, the more obvious it became. She wasn't the problem. The league was. Every assist, every game-winning shot, every calm post-game handshake, Clark was basically giving a free masterclass in professionalism. And every time she did, it made the league's earlier inaction look even worse. She held the spotlight without even trying. And the WNBA? It looked like they were hiding in the shadows. You could hear it in the commentary. The way sportscasters danced around the topic like it was radioactive. That incident, the controversy, the moment that sparked national attention. No one wanted to say what it really was, a blatant act of aggression, mishandled at the highest levels of a professional league. And while they spun in circles, fans weren't confused. They knew exactly what happened, and they knew who showed up and who didn't. Caitlin Clark showed up. The league didn't. So now, there's a new reality. A quieter one, but no less dramatic. One where the balance of power has shifted, not with fanfare, but with steady momentum. A player-led, fan-backed, sponsor-supported shift that the league can't afford to ignore anymore. Because they learned the hard way. When you alienate the player bringing in the most eyes, the most money, and the most cultural relevance, you don't get to control the fallout. You don't get to pick the narrative. You don't get to decide when the conversation ends. Clark did that without even raising her voice. And it wasn't just about the hit. It was about what that hit revealed. It showed how quickly the league will go quiet when it's inconvenient. It showed how reluctant they are to challenge bad behavior if it risks disrupting the illusion of unity. It showed how little they understand the actual weight of the moment. And yet, they still underestimated the reaction. Because this wasn't just about sports. It was about visibility, about equity, about safety, about the very real fact that when a female athlete is assaulted on the court and the league does nothing, it sends a loud message to every player watching. Don't expect us to protect you. Clark didn't need to repeat that message. The WNBA did that themselves. And then, after the fact, they scrambled to claw back some kind of credibility. But credibility doesn't come from last-minute fixes. It comes from consistency, from leading in the hard moments, not reacting to backlash once it's already out of control. What they didn't understand is that people weren't just mad, they were invested. Fans felt like Clark had been disrespected, and by extension, they had been disrespected. Because she wasn't just a player, they had made her a symbol of what women's basketball could be, of how far the league had come, of what was possible when talent meets opportunity. So when the league failed to defend her, it felt personal. And that connection, that bond between Clark and the fans, it only got stronger because she never once acted like a victim. She never looked for sympathy. She didn't cash in on the controversy or use it to sell a redemption arc. She just played, like she always had. And by doing so, she flipped the power dynamic entirely. Now, when the league moves, it's with her shadow looming large behind every decision. You can see it in how fast they respond to fouls now, how carefully they word post-game reviews, how visibly aware they are that people are watching more closely than ever. They're not just managing the game, they're managing perception. And that perception, it's ruled by what they didn't do when it counted. Caitlin Clark didn't just expose a system. She unintentionally forced it to evolve. And she did it without stepping outside her role, without breaking character, without ever needing to rant or rage or retaliate. She held her ground. And in doing so, she forced the league to meet her there. That's not just resilience. That's control. And now, going forward, the WNBA knows exactly what's at stake. Every policy, every rule, every piece of player safety reform will be judged by the standard Clark unintentionally set. One where players are no longer just assets. They're advocates. Where fans don't just cheer, they hold receipts. And where sponsors don't just pay, they pressure. This is the future the league tried to avoid. But now they have no choice but to build it. And Clark, she's not leading the charge loudly. She's doing it the same way she plays basketball. Sharply, calmly, relentlessly. She's redefining leadership without ever calling herself a leader. She didn't need the league to defend her. She let the fans, the sponsors, the gameplay, and the silence do it for her. And they did. Loudly. Let us know your thoughts. Was the WNBA's course correction enough? Or are they still behind the curve? Tap the like button if you think Clark's handling of this whole mess should be studied in every PR department in the country. Share this with the basketball fans in your life, and hit subscribe, because in a league where silence used to mean safety, now it means scrutiny. And Caitlin Clark made sure of that.